Hello guys, welcome back to Research Reality. Today we will be talking about the election results and what we will be doing going forward. So what might have been a shock to some and a point of jubilation for others, Trump will in fact be returning to the White House. And not only that, but he will be backed by a Republican Congress in much the same way he was for the first 2 years of his first presidency. Not only that, but he will also be backed by a Republican-leaning Supreme Court that may or may not lend a hand with various legislation and court cases that come their way. And not only that, he will also have less guardrails this time, as there will be more entrenched loyalists around him this time around. So looking at the stats from his first administration, it looks like, I want to say the number's like 40 out of 44 former officials of his administration left, and they all said a very similar thing, that it was a terrible place to work in, that Trump is very much in it for himself, and as a number of former military officials would later go on to say in their own words, that Trump was a threat to national security. But setting all of that aside, Trump did win. He even won the popular vote, for what that's worth. And I guess for me personally, I was a little shocked by the turnout on the Democratic side. As I mentioned in my previous video, I am certainly not a Democrat fan. I would much rather have the corruption that we know, the business as usual party, versus someone who is more or less just a cult leader who is very much in it for himself, with the rhetoric and the potential political retribution and, oh, you know what I'm talking about. At time of filming, really only time will tell to see just where exactly the rhetoric stops and the governing begins. And what I mean by that is just, what exactly was Trump saying all this time on the campaign trail that was more or less just to rile up his base in an attempt to get them to come out and vote for him, and how much of it does he actually want to enact? But also, knowing Trump, he's very transactional, so it's also who are the people around him, and what will he give them in return for that loyalty? Again, going back to all of those former officials who served in his administration, of course, when he picked them, they were the greatest thing ever, and then when they left and talked shit about him, then they were the worst thing ever. But of course, we already know this. This isn't anything new. But what is new is that the world is very different at current standing than it was when Trump first took office. Again, we have the war in Ukraine, we have Israel-Palestine, we have the ever-evolving climate change, we have individual rights and civil liberties that may, in fact, come under attack. But again, only time will tell. I'm trying not to catastrophize this, because this is not a catastrophizing video, or at least I don't want it to be. Because while I don't think that another Trump presidency with everything that's surrounding him, again, that Republican Congress, the Republican-leaning Supreme Court, while this all seems quite bad, there are still methods of resistance. The mission objectives for the channel still have not changed. We will still be talking about that creative culture and the underlying resistance found within, and we will still be covering topics such as the election, more sporadically, but still, and we will do what we can. So just kind of piggybacking off a number of conversations I've had with people just about the election and the results, there's definitely a lot of fear. There's definitely a lot of concern, which I think is certainly warranted. I also have friends and family who are just completely ecstatic, and I understand why. I mean, the economy was really the biggest issue, and while I myself was surprised by the outcome just in terms of the total turnout for the Democratic Party, at the same time, America does not exist in a vacuum. When you examine what happened globally within various democracies, incumbents of various political leanings had a really hard time gaining those votes. Most notably was in the UK, where the conservative Tory party, which had been ruling for like 14 years straight, lost in a landslide to the Labour Party, and that same trend is what continues here in the US election. And the reason why we saw this global trend is because after the pandemic, with all of the economic downturn and inflation and everyone just genuinely worried about the economy, they just looked to whoever was in power and deemed them responsible for this economic downturn that they were facing on a day-to-day basis, whether they were actually responsible or not. So yeah, at time of filming, we really don't know exactly what his cabinet will look like. We have a general gist of the kind of policies he wants to enact, not only just based on his rhetoric, but also Project 2025. And also, with these guardrails no longer in place, we really don't know how far he will take this political retribution thing, or the mass deportations, or just various other things that he mentions in his rhetoric. Again, just what exactly was rhetoric and what was just trying to rile up his base. So yeah, it's not looking super great from my perspective. But ultimately, the outcome of this election has not changed the overall mission objectives of the channel. We of course will still be making videos talking about our creative culture and that unified resistance found within. But I really think that with all of the fear and concern that a lot of us have moving into the next 4 years, I really think that one of the greatest things we can do is build a thriving, vibrant counterculture. And that's where the wall comes in. Whether it's Kendrick Lamar talking about "we gon' be alright," or it's Sepultura saying "refuse, resist," or it's Immortal Technique saying "live for revolution" instead of always dying for it, there is still so much inspiration and so much knowledge and just so much humanity, for lack of a better term, that can be found within our creative culture. But of course I would say that, being the guy with a YouTube channel talking about revolutionary music. And speaking of revolutionary music, we will be back next week, and I'm not kidding this time, with another revolution review of the third Rage Against the Machine album, because that's what I'm doing personally to cope with everything that's happened. Even though I would largely be doing the same thing even if Harris won, we are still facing a number of the same problems regardless of what the Trump administration will do with those problems. So we cannot lose hope. We cannot lose that drive for resistance. America has survived way worse, and we're still here. I don't think this is the end of democracy. I don't think this is the end of the world. And I will happily be pleasantly surprised if none of the worst outcomes happen. But until then, guys, I'm done rambling. What did you guys think of the US election? I know I have a lot of conservative friends that watch the channel, so what exactly are you looking most forward to in a Trump presidency? If you are not so thrilled at the prospects of another Trump presidency, what are you most concerned about? And as always, please tell me what you want me to review next. Or hey, even talk about next, I don't know. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Definitely like and subscribe if you like the vibe. And as we move forward in the coming days, weeks, months, years, we will work to build that culture of resistance. But until then, guys, take care, and we will see you on the next video. Later.